Okay, the next step is all the sub-assemblies are put together, so it's time to put everything in a case. First thing I want to do is, these are the thrust washers for the counter shaft. And in all my years of doing these, I've never come across one with a shim. I even went digging through parts books and I can't find a part number for it or mention of it in parts books. But there it is. I already test fitted it once and it feels good with a shim in, and there's about that much end play without the shim, so I'm gonna leave it in. I mean, it doesn't look homemade, or if someone did, they did a good job making it, but chances are you're never gonna have to worry about a shim, or if there's some in there, there's probably a reason. So I'll put some grease on these so they stick real good. Then I'll stick them in the case, and then the shaft goes in. First thing to go in after the thrust washers is the counter shaft, which is all assembled. Got the bearings in, sprag clutch, gear, everything. This might be a two-handed thing. You want to try to make sure those thrust washers don't fall out of place. They do have a little tang that keeps them from turning and kind of holds them in place. A lot of it's just about having the shaft square to them, which I'm not getting. There we go. There, now it's fitting in there. And then you don't put the shaft through this right yet, because other things won't fit in if this is up in place. So you just slide it back to the edge there, and then we'll get the shaft in later. Next thing going in will be the tail shaft. You want to make sure on the gasket, there's two gaskets that look very similar. One is for the front cover, and the bolt spacing is actually the same, but the oil drain hole is different. So you want to make sure you get the right gasket in the right direction. That's the front one. This is the back one. Notch is a little closer to one side than the other. So yeah, there, all the bolt holes line up, and the oil drain hole. Right gasket. Okay, ready to stick the tail shaft in. Here's the drain hole that has to line up with this drain hole, so keep an eye on that when you put it in. Normally all the studs should be in these holes, but two of them, the studs came out instead of the nut coming off the stud. So I took advantage of that and put my long guide 3/8 bolt in there to help guide it in. Gasket is in place. Make sure that it's lined up for, and we can't shove it all the way in at first because we need to get then the gear with the it says with the, what they call that, the countersink recess doohickey towards the back. This one doesn't have that in this particular style, but the offset towards the back, I believe that was the way it was in the disassembly video. You can't get her in there too far, because then you need to put the clutch spider in, and that has to come through the side. Stay in there. Oh, I see. This gear isn't on the splines yet. Get on there. There it goes. Then we should be able to slide that all in like so. Sure, that was all as clear as mud, but I'll go ahead and get the bolts on. I can tighten that up, draw that in, and then we'll get the snap ring on the end of the shaft, and that part will be done. If for some reason your stud backed out like mine did here, put a little sealant of some kind on the threads, because they go right through the case, and it's not gonna make a huge leak, but oil could creep its way through the threads and make just a wet spot. Bolts are all in and tightened up. Later versions of this didn't use a gasket, that used an O-ring, so I'm sure you can figure that out if you happen to have that style. Then I got the snap ring in on the end of the shaft here that keeps the clutch spider in. If you've got the early style without the updated output shaft, this is when you would check your bearing preload, get that snap ring on the front, and then you tighten the nut on the back here down until I think you put a fish scale on it with a string and pull that. I think it's 5 pounds of pull above seal drag. So you put it all together and kind of got a guesstimate on your seal drag, but you can check it for end play and then stake your nut. There shouldn't be too many of those style of shafts out there anymore, but never say never. I know I've got one in my 1800. I did a 1600 for a friend that still had the old style shaft in it. But yeah, you can't just crank down on the nut on those because that's what sets your bearing preload. Just double check. I got the seal inside there, the lip facing back. I think I'll put just a little grease on the lips so it slides on over this shaft here. That's tapered and everything, but and then the book shows doing it this way. Get the, and just kind of wiggle and jiggle until all the plates go in. I think we've got them all. You can look in the side here and see if it's turning all the separators. Biggest thing you want to do is try to keep her good and centered at first so that seal starts good without rolling over. You don't want that. I have put them on with this front shaft mounted in the cover, but as you'll see in a moment, that kind of interferes with getting this bottom shaft up in place down here. So I thought I'd try it the book way this time. Make sure you got the new O-ring and the bore there. So that's what seals the lower shaft on the front. And on the back, it is sealed by the O-ring that is on the shaft. You can see it's got holes drilled in it. For lubrication, one for each bearing and another one to help lubricate the sprag clutch. So it looks like my thrust washer stayed in place good in the back. And you just lift her up into place till the splines align. And my thrust washer moved a little, so I'm reaching in there, shifting it around my finger until it gets back into place. Okay, I think I got the back started all right. I'm thinking the front's hanging just a little low, so it's cockeyed. Nope, I do not have it started. Dang it. Got that front up a little bit, got the back started, and then she went better. Then we get around to the front. That's why okay, this front one has spun some. So I get it where the notch is back in, that's notching the housing. Kind of get it lined up by hand there. There we go. There, it's in. Just need to bump it through the O-ring just a little bit. Use the old meat hammer on the back side there. There. Double check that the thrust washer is where it's supposed to be and not laying down low or something. And that shim. Normally I don't have to contend with a shim, but it looks good. So I can put the retainer bolt and wedge on the back here and get that secured into place. Now you might be wondering why you got to get the front or the top shaft in before you put the bottom shaft back up in place. I'll slide it out. You can see the drum hits that gear on the bottom, so you just can't pull it all the way out. So now I got to get the front cover on, and like I say, I've done it with the front cover completely assembled and get it most of the way, and then I can still kind of reach up in there with a finger, but this does seem to be a little bit easier. Time to put the front cover on. You'll notice there is a notch right here. That's where the shifting spool lines up on the side there, so you want to make sure that notch is over there. Right along just under the pin for the shift lever. We'll see how well this bearing slides into this housing. I am going to put a bolt in or two just to keep the cover from sliding out, because I got to pull the shaft out to get the snap ring on that bearing. Oops, and I went too far. Well, this one ain't a super strong snap ring. I could probably get this one on by hand. I did. And now a quick test to make sure I got the sprag clutch in right. I should be able to turn the output shaft counterclockwise while holding the input shaft from turning. So I've got it right. Let me show again. I'm going to hold this, keep it from turning, grab the sprocket, turn it that direction counterclockwise from the back. That's the same engine the engine turns, and it is working right. If I try to turn the input shaft the same way, I can't keep the output from turning. If I turn the input shaft backwards, which only happens if your engine runs backwards, it freewheels. So my sprag clutch is in right. Quick, easy test before you get too much farther. Got another gasket, the one left over that almost was the same as the back one. And there is a drain hole down here, so you got to make sure that is clocked correctly. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I got the gasket behind this cover I put on. Hopefully you saw it in the video. And if you got an O-ring style, then this stuff doesn't apply. Just put an O-ring on the cover and slide it in. And then there is this retainer that I have forgotten to drive the seal into yet. So I'll do that. Got the seal driven in with the lip facing this side. Here's the oil drain hole that needs to line up with that oil drain hole. I drove the seal in flush. If you're just looking for the front seal, CR541441, the one that came with a kit. So we just make sure that oil hole is facing the same. I do believe these bolt holes are offset, so there's only one way for it to go on. There it goes. We put the clutch bearing throw out tube part doohickey on. Once again, that's only gonna go, look at that, I got on the first try. Let me turn it just to make sure. Yeah, it won't go. Those bolts are offset, so it's only going to go one way. I used up all my luck and got it on the first try. Come on. There. Put the nuts and lock washers on, and we'll tighten her up. Okay, I'm going to do a little demonstration of how this thing actually works. So we'll start out underdrive. Power comes from the engine through this gear down to this gear. The sprag clutch engages this shaft, which drives this gear. And when you're assembling, make sure that pump drive gear is towards the back. This gear drives the pump. This one drives this shaft up here, which is splined to the output shaft. And because of the size of the gears, you get gear reduction. So it slows the tractor down from engine speed. What is it? Somewhere around 17, 20%, somewhere in there. I put some grease on this shaft and the gear here. And if I'm in underdrive, they should stay lined up as they go around, because the power is going through this way. If there was enough drag in the discs, it might, but I'll hold the output shaft to cause a little resistance to make sure it drives through underdrive. And as you can see, the grease is still lined up. So I got the grease lined up for identification. This is just a thrust washer. It can turn on its own. We're watching that grease mark there against this grease mark there. So I'll put some air to it. Put some air to it, turn it so it's indirect. Here comes the first grease mark. There, I'll let the air off. So here's the grease mark that was on the teeth and the grease mark that was on the shaft. So you can see the shaft made about a quarter of a turn farther than the gear did. That's the purpose of the sprag clutch, is to let this freewheel when you're in direct drive. Get that out of the way. The other advantage is, let's move that back up, is the pump gear. When you go into direct, the shaft is turning faster because it's being driven by the output shaft. It speeds up the pump, so pump output increases when you're in direct drive, which is good. That's when you need oil. When you're in underdrive and you just need lubrication pressure, the pump slows down because this bottom shaft is turning slower being in underdrive. So less pump output, less power drag. You just need enough to circulate through the cooler and lubricate everything. And that's the gist of how it works. Now we're in underdrive. Those grease marks should stay about a quarter of a turn off. They did. That's how the magic happens. Like the side cover's ready to go on. Got my gasket in place. Tested it, everything seems to be working all right. So it's just a matter of holding this baby up while I slide the cover on over it and then get it on the dowel pins and the stud up here. You don't want to forget to put the new O-ring in the hole there. And I grease it up a little bit to help that slide through there. Couple smacks with the old rubber mallet helps get her on the dowel pins. Now I just need to put the bolts in the nut and back in and secure them, and put the shift lever on, the loop line and a filter and the cooler and those lines. Clutch fork back in. Something to, seems like it happens every now and then, and I'll admit I've done it one time. Make sure the clutch fork gets facing the right way. The bolt head and the lever is up on these, should be facing back when everything's in position. If the bolt head is out here, it's going to throw the geometry off of the clutch pedal. It's going to be hard to get the linkage adjusted right, and it's going to push harder, and you're going to say, ugh. Don't forget to put the drain plug in before you add fluid. I think that's where we're at. One of the common questions that comes up is what oil to put in there. So dipstick shows type A, which was automatic transmission fluid. Of course, when this was designed and built in the early 60s, there was one or two transmission fluids. Basically your type A, and that was mostly because of those sprag clutches. You don't want too thick of an oil. Later on, the universal transmission fluid. AGCO calls it 821XL. And like over and unders, it replaced the ATF. I know of at least one person that has put universal in a Hydra Power and hasn't had any problems with it. It's a good fluid. It does get kind of thick when it's really cold out, but the nice thing about the Hydra Power is the heat exchanger. Warm water or coolant from the engine is coming through here when you shortly after firing it up, and so it'll actually warm up the fluid in here at first before it eventually cools it. My friend Alan, I told him he replaced some that I put in his tractor, and he even found Dextron 3. This is not necessarily an STP endorsement, but finding the right fluid can be a challenge because some of the newer fluids have different additives in them. But Dextron 3 Mercon as a replacement for the old ATF. Do not use ones that specified Ford Type F. From what I understand, the F-type fluids have a friction additive in them. Somehow or another, they're different. So if you can find something that's the Dextron 3 equivalent, that's probably your best bet. There's probably other brands of it, but I have this here, so we're going to use it. Got my gauge set up for testing. That port there, 1/4 inch pipe thread in case you're wondering. And we're shooting between 140 and 190. So this gauge should cover it for me. There's oil in it. Got a drill hooked up. This is just a piece of flexible radiator hose. Clamp it onto the chuck on a drill, and you want to turn it this way when you're facing that way because that's the engine, or direction the engine turns. So let's see what she does. Oh, my battery might be low. Yeah. Time to switch batteries. Okay, fresh battery, hopefully. Supposed to have a minimum of 20 psi for lube circuit pressure. Looks like it's getting up to about 40 psi. I'm gonna shift my drill back down. And then if I shift this, oh, the drill can't, uh-oh. My hose is slipping. Let's see what she does this time. 150 psi while it could turn it. Well, let's switch the drill into low gear and try it. Not going terribly fast, but I'm getting 150 psi. It's supposed to be a minimum of 140. So I'm thinking it's going to be all right at those low RPMs. There's 0 shims in it. It's supposed to be a max of 190. I'm sure it'll go up a little bit when you can get some more speed on it with a tractor. I don't want to burn my drill up. Better give that a break. I think I'll pull it out and add a shim. Shimming up the pressure is pretty easy. Get this hex plug here. There's going to be a little bit of oil. I thought the kit had some in, but this kit didn't. But I had some from some other kits. I'll start with 1 shim. It's just looks like a washer. Just as long as it fits in there, like a 1/4 inch washer or something like that. We'll see how much that bumps the pressure up. That took it to 160. Now maybe I'll put a couple more in. Ugh. Oh, my poor old radiator hose has just about had it. It's turned a lot of Hydra Powers and over-unders over the years. Like that, got it to about 175. I'll put in one more. And takes her up a little over 180. I think I'm going to leave it there. It's probably going to generate a little more once it gets sped up, but essentially the plunger moves back. So even if it spins faster, it should open the port more and maintain pressure. But we'll go with that. A little bit lower pressure gauge so I can actually do a better test of the lube circuit pressure. Oh, that's better. It's getting low too, but got 40 PSI there, even with the battery running down. Set a minimum of 20. Yeah, 60 PSI. Amazing what a fresh battery will do. That's better. So there we go. It is completely gone through. I'm not seeing any leaks. It's another nice thing about bench testing them. So basically I just gotta take the gauge back out of the test port there and put the plug back in, and it's ready to go back on the engine. Hope this helped you understand how they work. If nothing else, maybe some of you might want to try tackling repairing it yourself. I do recommend getting a service manual. One from the Floyd County Museum would be a factory reprint and much better than a INT manual. It has a lot more specs and details in it, worth the extra money it costs. It spells it all out just in case I missed something. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask down in the comments. And hope it helped, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks again.